Watching Morning Live. I'm live at the Nelson Mandela Centre of Memory ahead of a public and permanent exhibition that chronicles the life and times of Nelson Mandela. It is, of course, a display that is initiated by the Nelson Mandela Foundation. It will be launched this evening by President Jacob Zuma. So with me are some of the people who are critical in not only putting this together, but in documenting former President Nelson Mandela. The CEO of the Nelson Mandela Foundation, Sello Hadang, joins me, and someone who was quite critical in putting together the country's interim constitution back in 1993 also joins us to discuss how far he thinks that we've come as a country and also some of the critical issues of that time. So without further ado, I'll start with you, Sello. A very good pleasure. It's a huge pleasure to have you with us this morning. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Sello, in the weekend newspapers, I'm not sure if you're aware, there's been another article just detailing the condition of former President Nelson Mandela, saying he is stable but unable to verbally communicate at the moment. I don't know if you've been in touch with the family at all. Does he know about the exhibition?
Well, one of the things that we've tried to do as the foundation is to give Madiba space to be enjoyed by his family and also for him to enjoy his family. You remember that we as South Africa and the world have taken a lot of his time away from his family, and now we think that it's time for his family to enjoy him. Interestingly, we had his family members here for lunch. We hosted them for lunch and for them to get a preview of what's going on here. Does Madiba know what's going on in terms of the launch? No, because we since 2010, we've tried to back off and just give him space. So whatever we do here, we do in his name, and we believe that we're doing the best that he would be proud of. So the exhibition that we've put together tries to pull his life and chronicle it in a way that people can understand what has happened over 95 years.
And as you said, you have his mandate to do this. What's the significance of this particular exhibition? I mean, there have been previous displays of Nelson Mandela and his life. What's the difference between those ones and this one?
I think one of the major things that we're trying to do here is to bring the Nelson Mandela, the human being, not just the politician, the political human being. And then you'll see that this is phase one of this exhibition. When we do phase two, we'll have more touch screens and for young people to be able to interact more with the exhibition. So we're hoping that when they come in, the people who come in will enjoy what they see, because we have people like Leon in mind, but also young people in mind. Not to say that he's very old, but yeah. So it's to try and capture the imagination of the young and the old, for them to enjoy the life and times of Nelson Mandela. And it's not only about Madiba. We try to also bring in many other voices that made Nelson Mandela who he is.
I'm so glad you touched on that, because one aspect of this particular exhibition is about the times, the era in which he was this formidable leader. So that's where I want to bring you in, Mr. Leon Wessels. At the time, you were the deputy chairperson of the Constitutional Assembly. So you helped put together the interim constitution that was back in 1993. It was very, very critical. The 16th, the 17th, and the 18th key points in bringing together the first democratic elections in South Africa. What can you remember about that negotiation? Were there ever any times when you thought this is just not going to work?
Well, I remember a lot of things. The first thing I remember was the day that CODESA once started in Kempton Park in December 1991. And I remember seeing Madiba coming to that occasion and how happy and excited he was. I was amazed to see how many people he knew personally by name. It was way beyond the Madiba charm. He knew the individuals, he knew the personalities involved. And from that day onwards, there were 5 years of serious negotiation, because the interim constitution, as you rightly said, was agreed to on this day 20 years back, but there was a further 2 years of negotiation drafting the final constitution in the Constitutional Assembly. Now, the one thing that I remember vividly from Madiba was his understanding of history, Afrikaner nationalism and African nationalism. And if you negotiate, the art of negotiation is not only to understand your own position, but also understand the position of the people you are negotiating with. And Madiba's stance was a pretty impressive one. On the one hand, he said, you are not negotiating with yourself. And because you don't do that, you must be able to compromise. But he was never, ever going to impair his core values in the position of reaching a compromise. In other words, equality, dignity, to cite examples, was never going to be compromised.
Now, I'm extremely pressed for time, but I must ask this rather controversial question. When it comes to the negotiations during that time, many people, in fact, let me not say many because they seem quite few, but they do believe that Nelson Mandela and the people who were negotiating at that time have somewhat sold out black South Africans, that more could have been achieved by those negotiations, and perhaps even the constitution today should be adjusted somewhat to make sure that there are more advancements for black South Africans. What do you have to say to that?
Well, not only black nationalists claim that, white nationalists also claim that. In other words, that in itself is a living proof of the fact that the greatest denominator in South Africa still is the Constitution. You cannot please everybody, because if you stand for anything and everything, that is what you will fall for. And we stood for something, and the principles are there. However, one should not shy away from discussions and debates about the Constitution. I'm sure that is what Madiba also wanted and also had in mind. And there are provisions in the Constitution to ensure that there will be a continuation of discussions and debates.
We'll have to leave it there. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time. And that's where we leave this broadcast as well, here at the Nelson Mandela Center of Memory. The exhibition is being launched tonight by President Jacob Zuma, so you and I can both be able to come and see it. It is open to the public, and it is a permanent exhibition. So it's probably something that you'd want to come and see with your youngsters now that it's December holidays. It's a trip worth making if you take it from me. We'll leave it there for now. We'll take a quick break.